My name is Xiaoming Li. I'm professor in health promotion, education, and behavior. And also I'm the South Carolina Smart State Chair for Clinical and Translational Research at the Arnold School of Public Health at the University of South Carolina. So it's my honor to introduce our next keynote speaker, Dr. Wilbert Panhuis, the director of NIARD's Officer of Data Science and the Emerging Technologies. Dr. Van Panhuis received his MD from the Free University Medical Center in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, and a Ph.D. in infectious disease epidemiology at the Johns Hopkins University, Bloomberg School of Public Health. Prior to joining NIDAT, he has served for 12 years as a faculty member in epidemiology and biomedical informatics at the University of Pittsburgh. Dr. Van Panhuis is a globally recognized leader in data science and public health, with established track records of improving access and the use of data for public health research. He has been highly successful in building larger scale international partnership for data sharing, data integration, and data-driven research on infectious diseases with the scientists from various disciplines and with government health agencies at the international, national, and local level in the United States and globally. Dr. Van Panhuis' research has been published in high-impact scientific journals and has been featured in over 200 international media outlets, including the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, and the BBC World Service. He has published a similar study on the impact of US childhood immunization using over a century of data, and work on dengue transmission using data from 8 countries in Southeast Asia. He has also published on the challenges of data sharing in public health, and he has organized multiple international symposia on data sharing, access, and integration for public health research. The title of Dr. Van Panhuis' speech today is "What Can Data Science Do in the Fight Against Infectious and Immune-Mediated Diseases?" Let's welcome Dr. Van Panhuis.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lee. And it's an honor to be here at the conference. And thanks for everybody to still be here with us at this today. And I hope that everybody had a great conference so far. The program seemed really, really exciting. And I will now share my screen to start the presentation. Okay, there you go. Okay, so quickly see if I can get my pointer. Yeah. So as Dr. Lee mentioned, I would like to talk today about what data science can do in the fight against infectious and immune-mediated diseases. I am at, as Dr. Lee mentioned, at the Office of Data Science and Emerging Technologies in the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. An introduction of our institute first, for those who may not know all the details. It's one of the 27 institutes and centers at the US National Institutes of Health. And the mission of NIAD is to conduct and support basic and applied research to better understand, treat, and ultimately prevent infectious, immunologic, and allergic diseases. The Institute also has the mandate to respond to emerging public health threats, as many of you probably have seen and will know through the response against the COVID-19 epidemic. The Institute in fiscal year 2021 has supported 6,000 about research grants and contracts at about $5 billion US as a really large extramural portfolio of projects around the mission area of understanding, treating, and preventing infectious, immunologic, and allergic diseases. The Institute, NIAID, also has quite a few intramural research labs and a large intramural research program that also includes the Vaccine Research Center. And then strategic priorities of the Institute are, of course, the SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19, universal influenza vaccine, medical countermeasures for emerging and re-emerging diseases. I think about diagnostics, therapeutics, vaccines, clearly. HIV vaccines, prevention, treatment are a really big priority area, and prevention, treatment of immune-mediated diseases, including immune tolerance. The organization of the Institute is that we have the Office of the Director with Dr. Tony Fauci. Then as part of that layer, there is the Office of Science Management and Operations. And my office, Data Science, is located in this Office of Science Management and Operations. There's also the Office of Chief of Staff of the Director. And then there are the divisions in NIAID, the intramural divisions, Division of Intramural Research, Division of Clinical Research, and the Vaccine Research Center that conduct research within NIAID. Then there are the extramural divisions that support funding for initiatives in the extramural community. That is the Division of Microbiology and Infectious Diseases, Division of Allergy, Immunology, and Transplantation, and the Division of AIDS. And there's also the Division of Extramural Activities that support extramural divisions, but that don't have many of their own funded initiatives. So these are the three extramural initiatives that most people in the community get supported from for research in this area. The value of our office being at this kind of layer of the Office of the Director is that we can look and coordinate and accelerate data science both in the intramural and in the extramural division. So we have the advantage of the cross-cutting overview at NIAID. Now, a little bit about our office. As I mentioned, it's located right here. It's our office in the Office of Science Management Operations. The mission is really to advance data science methods and technologies for broadly infectious and immune-mediated diseases through a research program, a training program, and policy development and implementation. And I'll go into a little bit more detail throughout the presentation about what types of things we are doing and how what we are doing relates to what the other divisions are doing. And also just to mention already that we are recruiting a deputy director for the office, as well as staff across program training, policy, and technical activities. As this is a relatively new office, we are really building out right now. So let me know if you're interested. Using data science for science goes way back. So now we're getting into the area of what data science really kind of means. We've seen, of course, already over 200 years, and this goes way back further, how data has been used for science and in infectious and immune-mediated diseases. This is, and as an epidemiologist, I cannot not show this map of John Snow in London, where he tallied the deaths due to cholera. Each dash here in the map is a death due to cholera by address, and he found that all these deaths are concentrated around the street, the Broad Street pump, which made him believe that the water supply through that pump may have been a cause of this cholera outbreak. And this legacy continues until today, when you see here our director, Tony Fauci, giving the pump handle lecture of the John Snow Society, actually last year, right after I joined the Institute, which was a very nice coincidence. But also still, you know, as he also amplifies the importance of data for the COVID-19 pandemic and for infectious disease in general. Here is the notion that we can fight Ebola with information. This is from USAID from some time ago. But again, with the idea that you can learn from the use of data and information and the digital technologies that can help in the response against outbreaks, such as the Ebola outbreak. And that's really something to think about. How can this information really help fight diseases? A bit more specifically here around the issue of intelligent vaccine design, where you can actually have data as well as computational methods involved to improve the development of vaccines. And this is a more specific application of data and computational methods in a key mission area of NIAID, which is development of vaccines. And so that gets us closer to how data can help in fighting infectious diseases through the development of these types of countermeasures. I also would like to go into this, this kind of a little story about work that I did at the University of Pittsburgh that is really illustrative for how data can help in advancing science. And this was a project named Project TICO that was really about using difficult to use data and transferring that through standardization and integration into a data set that is easy to use. And by making that effort, really accelerating research afterwards so that only once this work needs to be done for this particular data set, and then others can benefit from that, and the entire scientific field can benefit from that. Here is the data that we were working with. This goes back 200 years as well, about late 1800s, actually 120, 130 years, where we have paper-based archives and records, as well as lots of PDFs documents that show these type of tables here, where you can see mortality data in cities in the US, here's Philadelphia, Baltimore, Charleston, and deaths from cholera, yellow fever, smallpox, typhus fever, enteric fever, which is actually typhoid fever, scarlet fever, and diphtheria, and the number of deaths due to each of these diseases. Now, these data have been published from this time point in the late 1800s all the way through today. But that data was in such different places and difficult to use that it took a lot of work to bring all the data together in one database. But once that had been done, once we completed that, enormous amounts of value could be gained from this, including making these kinds of high-level overview maps. Here you see weekly incidence rates of measles starting in 1928, every year showing epidemics of measles. And then in color coding for each of the states. And so in red, you can see high incidence rates due to measles, and in blue, the low incidence rates. Black is missing data. So for some states like Hawaii and Alaska, there were no data until the 50s. And you can see all the outbreaks occurring every year in all of the states until this big red line here in 1962, when the measles vaccine was licensed in the US, was introduced in the US. And you can see the dramatic decline of measles after vaccine introduction and the massive just difference from before and after the vaccine was introduced, just as a telling story of how impactful that vaccine program has been in preventing measles in the US. And of course, this can be used for advocacy on vaccination programs, but it can also be used for science to see and learn about the patterns of these diseases in the country. Now, we did this for lots of infectious diseases. You can see here the tail end of the smallpox outbreak in the US right before it was eradicated. We have the polio outbreaks here in the 50s with a vaccine after that, diphtheria in the early 1900s, pertussis in the 50s, and then with the emergence again of pertussis in recent years is already visible on these maps here. Rubella, mumps, and hepatitis, etc. And then we computed the number of cases prevented due to vaccines in this analysis that was published. But then what I really want to emphasize is the things we did after the publication is to make all that data available to the community. And this was an extra step of work, but it really paid off in a way that we didn't even realize. We did the work to make this into a repository, standardize the data. You can see the users going up from 2013 when we published this all the way to 2017, up to about 3,000, and the current number is around 6,000, 6,500 users. And that helped then to spur a whole range of research from others in papers here, about almost 20 papers in the 4 years after the release of the data that we did not work on. These are all papers by people that came in afterwards and used the data for other research, building on the data curation work that we did. And so in that sense, it really catalyzed all these new insights and research that was happening afterwards, which can then lead to countermeasures, new insights and products that can lead towards fighting these diseases and reducing the burden. And so in that sense, the data that was in those archives really kind of helped kickstart all this research and then moved on forward, just as an exemplar of how data science can help and data sharing can help. Another really telling example clearly is the rapid sharing of the SARS-CoV-2 genome sequence right after the pandemic was declared and notified to WHO in early January 2020. The sequence for the virus was shared, including on GenBank, paper came out of the people that discovered this in February 3, which is after the sequence had been shared. And then the entire sequence was listed in GenBank, that then spurred all the additional research on identifying the conformation of the spike protein and the structure of the protein, and then subsequently development of the vaccines and diagnostics and other therapeutics, monoclonal antibodies, etc. And so just as another example how rapid data sharing here really enabled very concretely developing countermeasures against this pandemic. And so there are these examples of how data sharing and data science and the methods that we develop can really help. Now, taking a step back about how data science is seen at NIAD and what we are doing. So what is data science really? NIH defines it as an interdisciplinary field of inquiry with quantitative analytic approaches, processes, and systems developed and used to extract knowledge and insights from large and complex data sets. This is from the NIH Strategic Plan for Data Science. And so what are the kind of elements we can extract from that? One is large and complex data that we know every year, bigger and faster data being collected. Extracting the knowledge with computational methods that also are more and more capable of analyzing large and complex data. And the interdisciplinary field where biomedical sciences and computational sciences come together. Now for NIAD, for research on infectious and immune-mediated diseases, this is not much different, but we want to tie the data science, the efficient use of data, and the computational methods, tie these to the mission areas and the strategy of NIAD. And so that is to better understand, treat, and ultimately prevent infectious, immunologic, and allergic diseases. And through diagnostics, vaccines, and therapeutics, these are the countermeasures that have a strong focal point in NIAD. And so we really link the data science capabilities of using data and methods to the mission areas of NIAD. And that's how we as an office try to see the value of data science for the institute and for the community. And so the four kind of focal areas there are to improve data access and use. And clearly we will be leveraging FAIR, definable, accessible, interoperable, reusable, and I'll get into that a little bit later, as a technical roadmap of how to improve data access and use. Also, the development and enhancement of computational methods, foster the interdisciplinary community to really enable the use of the computational methods, and a governance framework. The technical methodologies alone is not enough. We do need the governance framework around issues of equitable and transparent data access, but also protecting privacy. And so that's what we're doing. Then a bit more specifically, there is one of our core activities in terms of the Trans-NIAD Data Science Initiative. So I'll talk a little bit the next sets of slides about activities that are really cross-cutting at NIAD. And not so much activities that happen in each of our extramural divisions. So at NIAD, and that's why I show that organizational chart, there are the extramural divisions that fund data research and data-driven research, both in infectious disease, in allergy and transplant, and in immune-mediated diseases, and in AIDS. Our office is looking at the cross-cutting strategy, and this is kind of summarizing that strategy. And so there is the Nia Data Ecosystem that I'll show you in a little more about. That is the idea of centralizing data search and analysis, but that gathers up information from all the different repositories in the community. And the idea of this ecosystem is to gather up the data so that we can enable analytics to integrate and analyze data. And then the idea is to make data fair by taking NIAD data at the beginning of the pipeline, curating the data, depositing it in the repositories, and then connecting the repositories to the ecosystem. And that will then enable analytics and integration. So I'll talk about each of these steps, what we envision for that that needs to be done. And it may not be much new information. We all kind of know this, but I'd like to present it as part of our strategic ideas. So first of all, that many data about infectious and immune-mediated diseases, but also about many other diseases, are just not in repositories, right? We know that there are lots of data attached to supplements and journals, the university websites, there are labs or personal websites, even research projects and dashboards that have emerged. Even during COVID-19, there's been an explosion of research project sites and dashboards, and personal computers, just people that have data on their computer, and it's not by anybody discoverable. And you could even call this dark data because it's not known, it's not visible to people. And so that is data that is out there in the community, and there are large heterogeneity in where the data are. Now, then the issue of curation, that's the next step from that data. And just to say that it's complex but necessary. It's what you can call data cleaning and harmonization, quality control, re-representation of information. What we did with Project Chico with those data on infectious disease in the US for measles was re-representing information from these paper formats into digital formats and into formats that are easier to use. So a lot of the data was re-representation, standardizing as well, and then creating metadata. Now, these steps are considered, and I put some articles here. Cleaning big data, most time consuming, least enjoyable data science task. And just kind of put that out there that few people, well, I don't know, few people, but it's not to be known as a very hot kind of high visible part of the science is to do the data representations and standardization and creating metadata. Because it's not as clear to the new discovery that we like to see from analytics. But unless we do these things, the analytics are not possible. And so we really need to focus a lot of attention on, once we're done with the data, trying to do these couple of steps and then enable so much more research. And so FAIR is a roadmap for that. And the FAIR principles came out in 2016 of findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable. We've all seen them, and many people know them. They're also used and abused, I would say, in lots of different ways. But the way we'd like to look at them is they are technical specifications that enable the use of data by computer algorithms, especially AI. The whole FAIR principles were set up for computer interpretability. But we can leverage them also to make data used by humans easier, right? And use them as a technical roadmap. Now, even the FAIR has penetrated even into the current administration, where in the Biden budget of 2023, FAIR was actually mentioned as a priority to make federal funded data open to the public in a findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable way. So, I mean, if FAIR has really penetrated deeply into society, and it's something that we want to take very seriously as a roadmap. Now, metadata are a central pillar for FAIR. That's why we put a lot of attention on metadata, and I think it's really important. Conceptually, just there's the data file, right? And then there's the metadata, and the metadata have information in it that point to the data and that describe basically what somebody can do with this data and what the rules are about this data, what the access protocols are. And so the metadata can be stored separately from the data and can be all over to basically help with the findability part. The more the metadata are available for searching, the more people can find the data, and the metadata will point to the same data that's in the same place. And then if the metadata use standard terminologies, then that helps with interoperability, right? Because then different systems can use the data and can know if the data can be used together with other data or not. Now, then, the idea of the metadata for data discovery is quite clear. Here is, for example, a researcher with the Nia Data Ecosystem searching for data. The metadata will be indexed in this ecosystem, and the metadata point to the data sets that have metadata. But there are lots of data sets that I said already earlier that don't have metadata, right? And so the idea is if they do get metadata, then they can be searched and found in the ecosystem. And so some of the whole process that we're thinking about as part of this pipeline is to make more metadata and better metadata so that it directly feeds into the ecosystem and can directly link to improving findability, discoverability, and the use of the data. Then we go from curation to depositing data in professional repositories. And as mentioned earlier, there's data all over, but not all the data is into professional repositories. The idea of a professional repository is that there is solid methods for storage, backup, security, transfer, and access, etc. There are also structured metadata, often with indexing and search capabilities, better sustainability than your own personal lab website, and it's easier to manage for the ecosystem to have a limited number of repositories to deal with than to have an infinite amount of smaller websites to deal with. Now, and this is in our own project Eco, we really found the value of this because as a research group, it's hard to maintain a repository that is professional. It's much easier to just offload that data to somewhere else, but that with pointers and with metadata, you can still use that data, interact with it, but at least we know the data is safe and sustained somewhere. And that's the idea of that. And I put a link here to the notice that NIH has, a very helpful notice about how to select a repository for your data. Then I mentioned connecting data to the ecosystem, connecting repositories to the ecosystem. And the ecosystem was recently, last September, awarded to Scripps Research 7 Bridges to build this ecosystem. And so we will, hopefully later this year, be able to release this as a resource for the community and then start building the connections to lots of different data repositories. And again, to say that we're not the only one, there's the Nia Data Ecosystem, there's lots of other data ecosystems now, NIH Common Fund, Cancer Research Data Commons, NHLBI, Data Catalyst, Biodata Catalyst across NIH, also in the industry, in Europe, the Open Science Cloud, and in China, ecosystems are being seen as something that is going to help with data integration and discovery. And then the last step, of course, is integrating and analyzing the data for new discovery. With lots of exciting research, computational research that uses different data sets together for new research. And the whole idea is that all of this high impact research is enabled by the data infrastructure, the data curation, the data collection, and the data preparations that go before we get to those places. And so that's what the pipeline is so important. Now it's an interesting vision, but there's lots of challenges. And I just want to point out a couple of challenges that we've been thinking about and that we will be thinking about. And this is definitely not all the challenges, but just some key ones that we've recognized. One is to represent metadata that matters. So there's lots of metadata in terms of administrative things like a title for a project or the authors, etc. But some of the more difficult metadata is going to be needed at some point. And to represent in machine interpretable format, the scientific methodology, the provenance of the data, the quality and the uncertainty of the data are going to be very, very complicated to represent and to use properly. And that's, I think, one of the challenges we're going to be facing with metadata. Then there's interoperability at the systems level, but then also interoperability at the data level, especially the semantic meaning of the data and how that can work with other data and how machines can start to use that information will be complicated. The cost, clearly, implications have to be thought through much more in depth than currently. And then there are the gaps in knowledge and skills where increasingly the computational methods are being used, but the biomedical research community is not necessarily equipped yet to use all these methods. There are ethical concerns about equity, inclusivity, also about reciprocity and benefit sharing, not just about data sharing, and privacy and other data use limitations. And then lastly, I would mention the academic culture that we're all working in, where career advancement is really based often on publications, and publications are such an important part of an academic career. But there are incentives around the issue of publications that can actually disincentivize data sharing, whether it's because it takes time and effort to share data or because there's the risk that somebody else will publish papers that you may not be able to publish. And so there is something that we need to, as a community, think about how that can be used or changed as necessary. Now, last couple of slides, I will show a little bit about the actual initiatives at the Institute. So I would say, so I'm listing some funded initiatives here, funding opportunities that are out there for people to apply to that are part of that curation pipeline from Nia Data all the way to integrating and analyzing. I would say, though, please be mindful that there is also the NIH Office of Data Science Strategy at this link, datascience.nia.gov, that have across NIH and also lots of really relevant funding opportunity announcements that are related to this, but that are not specific to infectious and immune-mediated diseases, but that still apply. And definitely, I would encourage people to look at those. And then there is our own divisions. I'm just looking here, I'm listing some things that are across cutting, but each of our divisions, as I mentioned, has their own funding opportunity announcements and initiatives that many of them include data science components. And those are disease specific, and I would definitely encourage you to look at those as well. In terms of here, if you look at the bottom part where we curate and put data in repositories, there is a funding opportunity, U24 databases, knowledge bases, and there's a notice here that you can look at that helps, that's meant to curate and put data in repositories and create repositories and knowledge bases. In addition, there is the ecosystem, as I mentioned, that's been awarded, that will run and build the first pillars of that ecosystem. And then there is an R21 actually notice out there to analyze and reanalyze data and do secondary data analyses. Then there is in the entire pipeline, all the way from curating to analyzing, some funding opportunities. One is around the SBIR, the Small Business Program, which if people are involved or related to small businesses can apply for the data science contract topics that are out there. And the data science contract topics cover all the way from curating to analyzing data, mostly around tool development. And then there is an NSF-NIH joint initiative called Smart and Connected Health, which is to build multidisciplinary teams of biomedical scientists and computational scientists to develop tools and technologies for data science in biomedical research. And that also goes across the entire spectrum of these steps. And then lastly, we have our own NIAD funding opportunity announcements with R21 and U01 mechanisms to build software and also to do early development of software as well as later development of software and computational tools for curation, repositories, and analyzing data. So that's a whole spectrum of work that we're building up, and you can possibly see in the next years that we're going to build this out and solidify some of these programs. Now, besides the funding opportunities, there is also, of course, policy development and guidance, which is a really active part of NIH and of our institute as well. Policy can be a really powerful tool to advance data sharing and data science, but it can also be regarded as administrative and regulatory burden that slows down progress and that can limit our advances. And so we are really trying to make the implementation of the policy in terms of process, in terms of guidance and training and infrastructure in such a way that it will become an enabler of new and exciting science rather than a burden. And clearly, I would encourage all of you to kind of follow along what's going on. There's a lot of activity now in terms of the genomic data sharing policy and current requests for information out there to update that policy and long-term considerations. Also, the final NIH policy for data management and sharing is coming out and will be taking effect in January next year, in less than a year now. This policy has been in development for about 10 years or so, and that will also lead to lots of thinking and about implementation. And so you'll see a lot of activity at NIH about these, and I would encourage everybody to help and think along. There's fellowships at NIAD for data science, and I think these could be really interesting to students and faculty that would like to, and I would like to encourage you to share this as widely as you can. At our own institute, in our own office, we have the Emerging Leaders in Data Science Fellowship, the ELF short. In 2018, it was started. We have 9 fellows that have completed the program so far. 8 are currently enrolled, and we are recruiting new fellows. Applications are open right now at the links below here. These are for graduates of master's or doctoral programs in biomedical sciences that have experience in data science methods. Now, this does not need to be deep experience in data science methods, but some experience in data science methods or programming or something like that. And then students or fellows that come to this program are hired through the ORISE mechanism, and you can learn more about at the link. The fellows rotate all over NIAID to gain experience across the institute. This has been a really exciting program, and lots of people have gone on to jobs at the federal government, including at CDC and other places at NIH or back in the academia. There is the Data and Technology Advancement Data National Service Scholar Program. These are more experienced scientists that can spend a year or 2 years at NIH, and we are recruiting one of these data scholars this year, and the announcement will come out pretty soon. Then there are 2 that that NIAD is not participating in this year, just because we are starting up the office and we need more staff to be able to supervise. So hopefully next year we'll participate in the Civic Digital Fellowship for undergraduate students and AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellowship Program. Although I would say, even though NIAD is not participating in these this year, other institutes across NIH are, and I would highly encourage everybody to look at these and send your students and your friends and colleagues to these initiatives. They're very, very good opportunities to really broaden and solidify your experience, and then move on to either jobs in the government or outside of the government. And so lastly, say how to get involved. We are trying to, of course, build a community around data science for infectious and immune-mediated diseases. Consider the data ecosystem as it comes along. Think about submitting data to repositories and work with us to add repositories to the ecosystem. It's the success of this ecosystem is going to be hinging upon connections to repositories and enabling users to find and use data from those repositories. Apply for the funding opportunities clearly, and the fellowship positions at NIH, and also the staff positions that will be posted soon. There is a massive need currently at NIH as well as at NIAD for staff that are knowledgeable in biomedical sciences, but also have the data science interest. Said follow the developments on social media and the website. There's lots of postings and activity there. Participate in the workshops. There are workshops on data science, there are seminar series, newsletters, requests for information. There's a lot of communication and possibilities to kind of join the conversation and help with your expertise. And then let us know. Reach out to us if you know about important data science work and activities that could be relevant. And then I'll leave it for comments and questions. The contact information is here below. And I think there may be some time to answer a couple of questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Van Panhuis. So thank you for such an important, also insightful presentation with both your wonderful, your own wonderful research, also the NIAD priorities and interest in the data science. So let's see, we have some question here. So, so one question from Georgia Tam. Wait, let me see. So the data science fellowship is a fantastic, and it's a long one. Can you provide advice for early career scholar like himself, who is from social science but do not have strong experience, can get benefit from the fellowship?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And so the fellowships that we're currently running are mostly, since NIAD is an institute that's really strong, focused on biomedical research and also a lot of basic and clinical biomedical research, it's sometimes difficult for folks from social sciences to kind of come into that community in the institute. And I think there are opportunities depending on the, I would say, if you are interested, look at the announcement and just apply, or but it helps to gain some experience in the biology and the biomedical topic areas. And then even with limited data science methods can come into the fellowship and build your expertise like that. But there are similar fellowships across NIH and other institutes that would lead you to one of these avenues and then gain experience, or gain experience in some biomedical methods or data science outside of NIAD or NIH yet, and then use the fellowships to come into there. So it's hard to give a clean-cut answer to all the cases, but it's a recognizable challenge to bring non-biomedical scientists into this field, but also to bring biomedical scientists that don't have data science experience in yet. And so we're trying to think, there are also biomedical training programs with data science focus areas that's at universities that could potentially use to kind of build that skill set.
Thank you. We have another question also related to the first question, related to non-data science research. So this is from Dr. Xueying Yang, I think. So as data science is a fastly growing, how do you think this will affect the traditional non-data science research, like a public health research? you have mentioned that the academic culture of the, for publications can be a disincentive for data sharing. How do you envision us to handle this to maximize the benefit from data science in the future?
Yeah, that's a great point. And we do see a lot of data science benefits to non-data science research or non-computational research. There is the data sets and the type of data collection is growing fast and changing, even in non-computational research, with larger and larger data sets to deal with and newer analytics than necessary to analyze these data sets. So I think even basic biomedical science and clinical research and others, they benefit from data science methods. And I think the more we see collaborations between data scientists and more kind of traditional non-data science researchers, I do think that data science is going to penetrate, data science methods and approaches are going to penetrate lots of different sciences. And I think I'm hopeful that in the end, all these developments will lead to a different scientific culture where non-publication types of achievements will also be recognized as development of technology or development of data will be a core scientific achievement for careers. But it will take some time. And I think through what you can do, I think, is through collaborations, through applications, if there is a technology or a method, push it through that pipeline of applications in biomedicine and in infectious disease, so that in the end, the community will start benefiting from those. But it needs active and proactive work. It's not something that happens automatically, as we probably all know.
Well, thank you. So we have two questions on non-data science issues. So now let's get back on the data science issue. So we have a long question from Dr. Chang. So since the COVID-19 pandemic, data science research has been focusing on using predictive models like machine learning to assist long COVID diagnosis, patient screening, phenotyping, and the clinical decision support. A notable issue has been the fact that no or limited clinical gold standard is available to support supervised algorithms. How do you think of this limitation on data science when it comes to new infectious disease, as clinical gold standard and pathological evidence is typically not immediately available?
Yeah, I think that's a terrific question again, and we're going to see a lot of that as we're thinking about pandemic preparedness and new pandemics and potential epidemics, and the lack of gold standard data, not only for new diseases, even for current diseases, there's been a lack of gold standard data in many areas. And I think it's upon the entire community and us as NIH to stimulate the development of these gold standard data sets, but also in development of automatic knowledge discovery systems and algorithms and methodologies that can help us go away from following PubMed and what's being published and then find out what the knowledge is, to more automated ways of tracking knowledge development and knowledge integration, and then models that can very rapidly build upon that knowledge that's being discovered and automated. And so there is some activity in some space of models that can be modified rapidly based on new information that's being published, but we definitely need a lot more in terms of knowledge discovery and automating that, and model development and automating that. And so I think the big answer is, I think that we have to come up with a technology to do those things, and have data sharing governance that would continue to encourage people, like we saw from South Africa and the Omicron variant, that will continue to encourage people to share data rapidly so that it can become discoverable as soon as it's been developed, and then build models on that. I think that timeline, that's how we could address some of these, but it's definitely going to be very complicated and will need a lot of development.
Well, thank you. I think we are approaching to the end of the seminar. So thank you again, Dr. Van Panhuis, for the presentation, for answers. We still have more questions for you, so we're going to collect those questions, then also make your email available to the audience so they can directly communicate with you, if that's okay with you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the time to talk, and great end of the conference, and feel free to get in touch. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.